drawing a big old blanket in this invisible ink. Hey, what's the word? Welcome to the next episode of Sunday Sidecar, the series where you're taught all the worthless facts and theories about last week's Tuesday Ukeday drop from yours truly, Uke Brute. This week's episode, drawing a blank with invisible ink. Yes, I realize that's not how the song goes, but it's kind of close to how the original line started in my head, because as, you know, most of my songs go, this song originated with that opening line, drawing a blank with invisible ink. I think I came up with that line as I was just kind of walking around, probably walking the dog, and getting Scrapito out on his daily, hike. And I had one or two broken lines, throughout the other verses, but nothing that was really coming together. I had that. And then just kind of a few broken verses other than that opening, drawing a blank with invisible ink. And I didn't really know where to take it. This is actually a very recently written song. So I had those opening lines early July. I just had that going, and didn't really know where to take it. Didn't really know what I wanted to do with it. What I wanted to say with those lyrics, or I didn't know what the lyrics. Obviously I know, drawing a blank with invisible ink. I kind of know what that says, but like, what do I want it to say, essentially? But then I left town for a little while, and I was doing some work in Michigan, and I was there for about a week. And while I was there, I was visiting with some acquaintances, but also, working from Michigan essentially. And we were in a relatively small city, and where, how do you look at the map or the mitten? Because you gotta say, I'm not even gonna try that because it's backwards. Anyways, on Lake Huron, it's kind of northeast side of mid northeast side of the state, and we stopped into a local bar and just having one or two drinks for the end of the night. I mean, a couple people. We were just sitting there. It was a very quiet local bar. And an older fella at the bar, just started talking to us because we were discussing Labatt's. We had, I was able to get a Labatt's Blue, which they don't really, have on at bars around where I'm at. It's a Canadian beer. And the guy was kind of sitting there. He was an older fella, like I said, and he just started talking to us about, beer distribution and what kind of beer you get here and like older beers. And we were just, just shooting the shit as you do with people at the bar. And at one point he started talking about like the border and the border problems and going to help people on the border, or help, he was part of an organization that was bringing food down to the border. And I was like, oh, and I kind of knew where things were going, and I was like, I kind of knew what his deal was. And I was like, oh, you brought food down to help the travelers, to feed travelers, the migrants that are crossing the border. And he's like, no, I brought them for the border patrol. It's the number one problem in our country. And again, I kind of knew where this was going, and I'm like, let's engage them. And so I said, no, it's not, because it's not. The border problem is not even in the top 10. Then we just kind of started going off and just discussing, having a nice debate. At least I thought it was a nice debate, just discussing, the state of the economy, healthcare, automation, AI, just really got into it. He wasn't drunk, I wasn't drunk, we just had it was like a 40-minute, conversation. Learned about him, he was talking about his sons, seemed like they're doing very well. And, we were kind of getting into it, and I like to bring a lot of facts and knowledge to my conversations, and he doesn't. That guy didn't. He liked to, rely on anecdotes, and we kind of get into the lyrics, and we can get into a little more. We were talking about I was talking about how this housing market, is out of reach for a lot of people, younger folks, millennials, Gen Zs, and he's like, oh, my sons are doing great. I have 3 sons that are that age, and they're all doing fantastic. And I was like, well, that's anecdotal. And he's like, no, it's not. I mean, granted, I don't think he probably understood what anecdotal meant, and that's why he said it didn't. But it got weird at times because he kept on putting words in my mouth, which was kind of upsetting to me. But anyway, at the end of the evening, where I can tell some of my friends they were not. I mean, we had to go somewhere else, do something else. And so, I thanked the guy for like a great conversation, genuinely and earnestly. And I was, saying, I'm walking away with additional information, insights from you, and I appreciate that. And I wished him well, and I wished his sons well. And then I went to shake his hand, and he was just kind of like, no. I was like, excuse me? And he was like, no, I'm not shaking your hand. I was like, okay, like, F you. I take back what I just said, whatever, and I stormed out. I probably should have handled it a little bit more diplomatically, saying how sad I was about it and how much I pitied him if he's unable to do that. But it does hurt that, someone is unwilling to participate in society and, acknowledge someone else's humanity with a handshake. And so that's what set me off on this song, because I came back and all of a sudden I realized that, like, that is the dude drawing a blank with invisible ink. And that kind of line speaks to, so often people, they're trying to make a point, and in their mind they know what that point is, but they're never able to really express it. And when they do try to express it, and you start poking holes in it, and you start, prodding it and showing how it fails, and, it's always just kind of like, oh, you're not, if you knew what I knew, you'd understand, and you'd get it. And not only would you get it, like, it would change your mind, even though I can't really express it. And I'm not bashing on, people's intelligence, because we all have, I have tons of stuff in my head, like all of us, where I think I can express it, but I can't. But at the same time, like, I don't have the certitude in that things. If I can't, really discuss something, I don't have the certitude to say, like, this is exactly what it means. And so it kind of, the song gets into, I just kind of used him as this, technically a straw man for the character, but he becomes the POV narrator for the song, and that's who the person is who's kind of singing, or relaying, these lyrics, and that's So it starts off with him, drawing that blank with invisible ink that they can only see, when they blink or they sleep, which is kind of always outside the peripheral. They can almost just get the idea, but I can't. And that's, it's kind of what that gets into. So puzzlewit is a real word, as is honeyfuggler. And I learned those just kind of recently as well. There was an exchange where Teddy Roosevelt, I want to make sure I get this right. Teddy Roosevelt described Taft, or he called him a puzzlewit, because Taft called Roosevelt a honeyfuggler. Puzzlewit is kind of someone who is just doesn't understand what's going on, kind of, just I don't want to say, just someone who just doesn't have a grasp on what's happening. And a honeyfuggler is kind of like a swindler, someone who kind of scams you out of stuff. And so this guy is just like, it's him getting defensive. It's like, look, I ain't no honeyfuggling, puzzle with Jumbletit. I made that up using that puzzlewit as a formation. Look it up. No hits for Jumbletit. So that's mine. And then fumbleness, it's just kind of like a general, obviously someone who fumbled and missed something, but as a discrete noun, a fumbleness. Shit, I'm a fumbleness. It kind of gets into it. We'll stick to the verses now, but the magic seeds, harvesting the dirt and dust fields, it's kind of just, and the subsidies, using old papers as subsidies is, just kind of not kind of, it's, it's a reference just to the agricultural, price control programs that were used back in the day, probably still even used, I'm not sure, but, where the, farmers are paid not to grow anything to keep their fields fallow. And it just kind of gets to that guy, I'm just talking like, that that guy's mentality I was just kind of get into when he's like, oh, these salt of the earth farmers who, blah, blah, they're the ones to keep everything going. And it's like, a lot of them were getting paid not to do anything. Just keep fallow land. Wait, where are the rest of the lecture? Oh yeah, then we get into the 1,000-page wordless dictionary. I just think it's a cool idea, a cool visual. I have a 1,000-page dictionary with no words in it. But then somehow learning something from that 1,000-page dictionary, I think, kind of speaks to that know-nothing attitude that a lot of people have nowadays, where they think, oh, I'm 30, 40 years older than you, so that means I clearly know more. Not discounting personal experience. Personal experiences are very important. But to say that, I'm somehow smarter, or, I know more, I'm more intelligent, just because of those 30 years. People fall back on that, and it's kind of based off that 1,000-page wordless dictionary that they memorized, thinking that they know something when they don't. We get into the smoking exhaust pipe, warming themselves up with the smoking exhaust pipe. Just reference to climate change. The dude was talking about how many jobs the oil and gas, market creates, and it's like, okay, sure, if you're only thinking, to the end of the next quarter, yeah, it's awesome. They employ a lot of jobs. But if you're thinking beyond the next quarter, a couple hundred years down the road, maybe it's not the best course of action. And just kind of like the denial of climate change. We can clearly look at the data. Not to get too crazy into this, but like in the 80s, it was on average each year there'd be 3 severe weather events that caused $1 billion in damage. So $1 billion weather event, average 3 of them throughout the 80s. Went up to about 9 or so in the 90s, in the double digits in the aughts. Right now we're sitting at about 23 on average a year. $1 billion weather events adjusted for inflation. That's more than 7 times, almost 8 times the amount. And it's like twice a year. Yeah, go ahead, warm yourself up with your smoking exhaust pipe. Sure. So yeah, I just kind of it's kind of set me off a little bit, and I just wanted to. It was not the conversation. The debate was great. Like, it was a really good conversation. And I did learn a lot from the guy, and I like to think maybe he learned something from me, but I don't think he walked away with anything, despite all the facts and data I was laying down. Yeah, he was just more about anecdotes, and just trying to say, like, hey, my kids are doing good, my neighbor's doing, and somehow these illegal aliens are making things worse for him that he doesn't even interact with, or that the state of New York's giving them money and he's mad about it. It's like, you don't live in New York, you don't do business in New York, you don't pay taxes in New York. Anyway, so yeah, just a little personal riff here on the song. I'm really pissed about my vocals throughout this one. It's really tricky to get it down. I really wish I was in that lower register for most of the song, how it starts off, and I lose it, and I can't get it back throughout the song. It's something, trying to work on a little bit more, but apologize for all you viewers, and listeners, more importantly, because you have to hear it. But, that is what it is. Maybe I rushed it a little bit, but I don't know. I was just kind of mad at the guy who wouldn't shake my hand, and he wouldn't participate in a civil society after all we just got done discussing. As I walked out, he told my friend, he's like, oh, I must have hurt his, he's like, oh, I hurt your friend's feelings. His feelings must have got hurt. And it's like, yeah, they did. I was hurt that the guy didn't want to acknowledge me as a fellow person, and shake my hand and say, thank you, have a good evening, wish you the same. But so it goes, and that's how, the cookie crumbles. So that is Drawn a Blank with Invisible Ink. Oh, just into the refrain, I suppose, because we didn't discuss that. It's that mentality where it's like, I drawn a blank with invisible ink, I memorized a 1,000-page wordless dictionary, I only know anecdotes that I want to apply to society as a whole as a solution, and somehow, and then once you get into the nitty gritty, and these are the same people that start saying, well, what is an order of magnitude? What is the order of operations? How do you apply the experiences to, myself and the limited personal experiences I know about or I've gleaned from some friends and family, and then apply that to 300 million plus people, or even 7 to 8 billion people on the planet. Like, things just start getting, out of control, and it's just really hard to grasp, and it doesn't work a lot of the times. So, not that I know it, just saying I at least understand, at least to an extent, the orders of magnitudes and the orders of operations, as the processes and workflows and different like judicial routes and legislative routes you have to go through to get anything really, any policy in place to impact 300 plus people or whatever, or just to help or whatever. It's huge, it's massive, and you can't just shout out words like deport them all. That's not going to solve everything. Who's working on? I mean, it's just crazy. Or So, anyway, big rant here. It was just more of kind of a cathartic song writing process. I know lots of times my songs are not very personal. I like to keep them very just kind of open for interpretation, and just kind of thematically, not ambiguous, but, again, like I said, open to interpretation, and just relevant, and I don't want to say self-applicable. I don't know if that's even a thing, but just kind of like relatable. So like anyone can relate to them. But this one might be a little not so much the case. Regardless, feel free to interpret it as you may. That's what we're here for. And as always, you're going to have to use your imagination. But yeah, that is Drawn a Blank with Invisible Ink. Hope you enjoyed, and check back soon for the ditty from Uke Brute. Oh, also, thank you for tuning in.